Thanks so much, Theo, for that introduction. And I think we flow quite nicely from talking about climate leaders to hearing from some climate leaders. So on the panel today, we have 3 women who are leaders in climate and sustainability in their own ways. I'll run through who is on the panel, and then I'll let them introduce themselves as they know their work best, and I'm keen to give them as much time to talk as possible. So firstly, we have Lira Valencia, who is a ranger with the London Wildlife Trust and works to inform Londoners about the environment and nature around them and help them engage with that. Then we have Bay Garnett, who is the inventor of thrifting, as she's sometimes known. She's a leading fashion stylist and editor and works a lot with reused clothes and thrifting and secondhand clothes, which will be exciting to hear about. And then finally, we have Emma Askew, who is the founder of Earth Minutes, an environmental communications company. So as I say, I'm going to move on to the speakers to let them introduce their work, introduce why they got involved in sustainability or the environment, and and what they do. So maybe, Emma, if we come to you first at the opposite end of the panel.
Sure. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. So I'm the founder of Earth Minutes, which is an environmental communications company, and we're a youth organisation, so we are young researchers and creatives in the environmental space. Our mission is to drive the future of environmental thinking and learning, and we do that through different communication services, from film production, social media, all the way to more kind of ed tech solutions, so 360 virtual reality. And I guess the way I got into the environmental space was through scientific research. I specialized in soil science straight out of uni. And from that experience, I saw the direct kind of disconnection between scientists and research and then communicating their research. And I really felt that, especially the topics I was working on, soil is one of the solutions to climate change. I was thinking we absolutely need to tell more people about this, but they just didn't have the communication mediums accessible to them. So that's when I founded Earth Minutes to start bridging that gap. And yeah, here I am now.
Amazing, thanks so much. Lira, if we come to you next. So if you could tell us both a bit about your work, what you do as a ranger at the London Wildlife Trust, and then why you started producing digital content and social media content to engage Londoners in the work that you are doing.
So hi everyone, I'm Lira. So I'm a wildlife lover and nature lover from Croydon, South London. And like Charlie said, I'm a ranger for the London Wildlife Trust. I work at Europe's largest urban wetlands, which is Walthamstow Wetlands in North London. If you haven't gone, check it out. Not a lot of Londoners know about it. It's near Tottenham Hale. And I've just always felt like there was never really people who looked or sounded like me in the sector. Growing up, in Croydon, in like the ghetto, I'm not gonna lie, there was never really anyone who was like connected to nature the way I was. So growing up, I kind of felt not welcome in that space. And then, I studied zoology and I did lots of voluntary work, and now I work as a ranger, and I just saw even more like the disconnection between people of color especially and people from low socioeconomic backgrounds in the nature scene. So I was like, this needs to change. And like one of the ways I make a change is through my social media platform, Instagram. I have an Instagram called Outside of Lira. Follow me, please. And literally, it's just about me kind of romanticizing London wildlife, because I think a lot of people think there isn't wildlife in London, and there is. And I think as well, there's a misconception that people of color or people from low socioeconomic backgrounds don't want to connect with nature. It's not that, we're just not given the resources. So it's me literally going out there, catching a vibe in nature and just being really honest with like the barriers of getting into nature. So yeah, that's what I do. I'm a ranger and social media content creator, I guess.
That's brilliant, thank you. And last but certainly not least, we have Bay Garnett. So, Bay, tell us about how you got this title, the inventor of thrifting, and some of the work you've done more recently. I will say as well, we have some photos from your work that we'll put up while you're speaking. So just let us know when to flick through them.
Okay, can you hear me? Yes, it's working. Yeah, hi, my name's Bay, and I always loved charity shops for a very, very long time. And I worked on back in the mid-90s, I worked on a fanzine called Cheap Date, which was a kind of anecdotal publication to fashion and consumerism, I guess, to some extent. And it really celebrated the idea of secondhand and irreverence and that kind of a wonderful alternative way of shopping and shopping for clothes primarily. And it was before the conversation of sustainability. So it was really about the pure style and love of it. And then I did some work, and the editor of Vogue saw the work and said, will you come and be an editor here? And she said, what idea do you want to do? And I said, well, I would really like to do a story using my thrift store clothes. And so I did. And so this is Cheap Date. This is the fanzine that I worked on. And then if we go to the next one, and then that was a picture. So it was very lo-fi. That's kind of Chloe Sevigny, who's also a real thrifter. So you can see that it was kind of quite zany. So then I went on to Vogue magazine. Oh, these are the fake campaigns using charity shop clothes. So that's like Yves Saint Laurent, Salvation Army. So if you carry on. And that's Christian Dior, charity donor. So I did these campaigns using Calvin Klein, cancer care. So that's kind of part Prada, poached. Yep, sorry. And then Burberry I did as borrowed. But again, so it was meant to be that thing of a double take, of using that thing of the power of marketing, brainwashing, marketing, whatever you want to call it, and then using thrift store clothes. So the editor of Vogue saw those and said, would you be an editor? So I then went on to I used my thrift store clothes. Kate Moss was the model, actually. And that's Cartier. And then I did that of Kate Moss. And then the fashion, which I found in a thrift store, and then a big fashion house used all those clothes as an idea. If you go on, oh, no, that's Michaela Cole. So that's, sorry. So anyway, going on, it was the first shoot for Vogue using thrift store clothes. And then I worked with Oxfam, and I do their London fashion fighting poverty fashion shows and their secondhand September campaigns. And Michaela Cole has been the star, Sienna Miller. So it's been a really wonderful journey of seeing how secondhand has become from something very on the periphery and quite anarchic and quite radical to now it's become completely mainstream. So it's just that's a little bit of snippet about me. Quite enough, I should think. Yeah, thanks, Charlie.
And thanks so much for bringing your photos along today as well. It's great to see your work on screen. So I have a follow-up question for each of you before we open the floor up for questions. But as Theo said, today is all about imparting the skills to become climate advocates. And each of you imbue many of those different skills in different ways. But if I could just pick out a couple of them. So Bay, if we can come back to you first. So I'd like to speak about how you deal with resistance to climate and sustainability in the field you're working in. As you say, you were the first person to bring thrifted clothes into Vogue. And in the broader fashion industry, have you faced resistance to using thrifted clothes, second-handed clothes? And how do you deal with that resistance? How do you get people on board?
I mean, I have. I did a lot more, and I would be told, look, you can't put thrifted clothes in the shoot because obviously, advertisers pay for the space. So magazines have to placate advertisers. It's a business, right? And that's why there are so many problems within every industry and climate change and sustainability because it comes down to money, largely. And so, what I would do is I did find resistance. And I would just put them in anyway, actually. Not entirely, but I just did because to me it just wasn't who I was. It didn't feel right. To me, if you're doing a fashion story and you're showing people, you're reflecting the times. There has to be an authenticity there. And for me, secondhand clothes, I couldn't ever step away from that. And actually, interestingly, and as everyone here will know, is that over the last 20 years, secondhand clothes are now completely mainstream and really welcomed. But yeah, I mean, people used to say stuff to me like, oh, you and your bin bag of thrift clothes, and it was really a little bit patronized for a very long time, actually, because it was seen, as I say, something periphery, something kind of a bit avant-garde, and I just never, I was always proud of it, and I think that for in terms of getting stuck in and getting involved in something you feel passionate about, that's around sustainability, that's around, working towards this idea of, trying to do something, I just think the best thing to do is to find something that you really love to do. I really loved that, and I was doing it before sustainability and climate change was happening. So in a way, it felt really natural to move on to working with Oxfam, where the selling of clothes go on to do something really super powerful, which is to help the poorest people in the world, and actually the people who are most affected by climate change. So resistance, yes, but I don't care what other people. I'm quite a kind of, I sort of do things my way, like most people do, So I just stuck with it.
Yeah, I suppose it's having the passion and self-belief in your authentic
Exactly.
ideas.
I believed in second-hand clothes. I believed in the power of them, and I believed that fashion copied from them. So why would I just, I don't know. Because it was what I always did, it was the real deal for me.
And like you say, the interest in second-hand clothes has exploded over the last few years. So it seems like you've tapped into something that a lot of other people are really passionate about too and want to reflect in their wardrobe.
I say to people, if you're going to buy second-hand, it's not entirely sustainable, but it is way more sustainable. And it is a form of activism. It is. It is. It's you're sort of, I've always loved the kind of going off-grid thing about it. There is something political about it as well. You're not feeding this system in the same way that you are when you buy new clothes. So, and it's a really much more sustainable way to buy clothes.
That's great. Thanks so much. Emma, if we can come to you next, and what I would love to hear your thoughts on is about building a climate network, which I think is so crucial when you're just starting out in this space. And so many of your projects are about bringing together different entities in the climate space, seeing how they can collaborate and further each other's progress. So could you tell us, how did you build your climate network, and how do you facilitate existing climate groups within that?
Yeah, totally. One of the first things that I learned going into the environmental space, actually, I started volunteering at the age of 16 down with surfs against sewage in the southwest. So I grew up on the coast. And through that community and organisation, I very, very quickly learned the tool of collaboration, which essentially builds your climate network. But they kind of, I guess, instilled in me the weight of a collaboration. It's not just a necessity, it's a survival strategy. The environmental space absolutely requires that. So I work across different scientific organizations, charities, educational spaces, and also the more kind of corporate business space as well. And they all work in very, 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 very different ways. So I guess in terms of building that climate network, the initial, first step of our work is to start aligning missions and co-aligning values and goals. So a great example is recently we worked really closely with a campaign called She Changes Climate. I don't know if you all know, but it's around female representation in climate leadership. And they wanted to really communicate this message to a wider audience, but they wanted to kind of create media, film around that, and they didn't have the resources to do so. So we connected them directly to someone else. We were working with Climate Invest in the more business corporate space. And from there, we activated a short film, a campaign film that has been kind of running the last year and a bit in different events. We take it around at COP. And that's one of the most essential kind of examples of why collaboration is so crucial, because the message has gotten so much further and wider just from the activation and collaboration there. And then in so many other spaces, especially in the scientific communities, they have a lot of incredible, groundbreaking research that needs to be shared, like I mentioned earlier, with the kind of soil-based carbon research and their connection to climate change, but not having the accessible kind of communication skills, but also resources to do so. That's where, again, business partners can activate that, whether it's through sponsorship, or whether it's literally aligning through their campaigns of what they're doing and how to share their story and their voice. So collaboration is absolutely vital, and I would say our entire network from all these spaces is kind of activated through that, and we continue to encourage that across all spaces. The educational, charity, business, science, they all need to put their heads together, especially in the environmental space where I'm not quite sure if competition exists, because when you're fighting for the same mission, you really just need to join forces to have that bigger impact.
And if I could briefly ask a follow-up as well. You work with really great companies in this space, but we know that a lot of other companies are maybe trying to claim they're green, they're claiming they're doing this or that. How do you find those initiatives that are authentic and are actually doing good work when you're building these collaborations?
Yeah, this is a great question, because this side of the work is exhausting and constant as well. It's constant reanalysis, I guess, of our barriers, our boundaries, our standards with it. And in the corporate space in particular, we find it quite grey area. It's quite conflicting. So greenwashing is obviously a huge term that everyone's been tripping over, trying to navigate a little bit more. We have our own ranking system, just down to what we expect from the partners that we work with. And unfortunately, it does eliminate so many people that it does make even sponsorships really quite minimal in comparison to other sectors of work. But a great example would be, I went to Reset Connect the other day. I don't know if anyone knows that event. It was really interesting because it was a really, really corporate event with loads of businesses claiming they were doing, lots of different successes, amazing, sustainable things. And the conversation wasn't there about what they're struggling with, what they're challenging, and basically the uncomfortable conversation. A lot of it was showcasing the successes. And so we were there to really challenge businesses to explore, I guess, where they feel like they can do better, and also just the sense of urgency around why they need to be doing more. It's great to celebrate successes, but more just needs to be done in that sector. So, especially with banking and pensions, we won't go into too much. Lira and I have just worked on a campaign in that sector, so there's a lot of work to be done there. But I guess the way that we do it is through a recommendation in the climate network that you ultimately build. I've kind of grown to learn to ask people those questions, not just the companies that we're going to work with, really probe those questions and get to know the ins and outs, evidence base of what they do sustainably, even as sustainability reports. Don't be afraid to kind of really pick it and question it. But also just through the people that you work with, the leaders you work with, getting advice from them, I think is the key thing to start understanding the initiatives that are really sound and impactful versus the ones that are doing it mainly for that kind of superficial claims.
Yeah, and that's really great practical advice as well for people new to the space, to sort of understand that that's a danger of some of the potential partners, that they aren't in there authentically, as Bay would say. Lira, if we come to you, I'd love to hear from you about how you engage people that maybe aren't already in the climate space, and specifically talking about marginalized communities that haven't been, maybe don't have the same connection to the environment, or they haven't had that same environmental education, how you reach out to them and bring them into this movement and show them how they can engage with the environment around them.
Yeah, so I feel like the nature scene has been such an exclusive, pretty dry scene for so long. It tends to be a lot of it's lacking a lot of diversity. So my kind of role on my social media is kind of to show like anyone can, advocate for nature, anyone can protect nature, anyone can learn about nature. And I think it all comes down to the use of language. There's a lot of expert terms or really scientific terms when it comes to the nature scene, and there's a time and a place for it, but I think when you're trying to connect people who come from marginalized communities, who haven't really had a connection with nature, who come from low socioeconomic backgrounds as well, we're not going to know what those terms mean, so how am I going to connect to anything you're saying? And I was having this conversation with Emma as well about like, it's all well and important to have, lots of research done in the climate sector, but then making sure that the findings of this research is communicated in a way that all communities can understand. And so that's what my platform is basically about, just showing how you can connect with nature and get involved, but in a way that people from marginalized communities can understand. So using terms that they can relate to. So yeah, I think that's...
And just as a brief follow-up as well, for people who haven't seen Lira's page, your videos are so beautiful of the work that you do. And you said before, it's about romanticizing nature and the environment as well. So as well as, you've spoken about how you make it accessible in terms of maybe the technical scientific side of the environment, but I feel like romanticizing is like thriving in nature. So could you tell us a little bit more about how you show that side, how people can thrive in those spaces?
I think it comes down to creativity, especially when you're doing it in like an urban environment where, I don't know, like romanticizing a pigeon can be really difficult, but it's something I like to do. It's like a challenge, but I love to do it, and it works. Like if you are creative enough and good at storytelling, you can really romanticize anything in London. And I think people connect when you tell them like really cool facts about things that are super overlooked. So things down to like bees and ants and snails and pigeons, things we all see like in London but are so overlooked. I think that's how I do it, just making it seem cool, telling them cool facts and making it personal to them. So like if I'm trying to get my friends to cut down, let's say on, I don't know, or look after the bees, let's say, I'll be like, guys, you should really start buying local honey or like reduce your honey. And they'll be like, Lira, but like, I don't care about bees. I'll be like, well, do you like to eat crops? Like, do you like to eat? Or if you don't start looking after bees, soon we're gonna not have pollinators to pollinate our crops. And making it personal to them and making it as well like fun and engaging, not so serious. I think that's the way to get through to people who are not connected to nature.
Yeah, that's a brilliant answer. Making it relatable but also fun is so important if you want people to be in it for the long run. And now I'd love to open up the floor to anyone who has a question. We have someone here. I don't know if we can get a microphone out. Or would you like to come up? You can ask your question here.
Hi, thank you. Really interesting to listen to all of you. My question's kind of around, because I'm kind of from like an arts perspective, like storytellers and artists, and I'm just wondering, like, what would your advice be to a storyteller or an artist about spreading a climate message? And I've got a little follow-up question after that. Yeah, like directed at Emma, but I feel like you've both got interesting perspectives on it.
This is an interesting question. We constantly tackle it because we want to make, the same as what Lira said really, making environmental content relatable. I think it's constantly kind of separated and segregated as either quite serious or a lot of the time, the urgency around climate change, the seriousness around it is really quite emotive and quite heavy. So it's how you can make it digestible and something that other people can just consume, like on TikTok, and learn from without necessarily knowing they're learning from it. I think it's the sense of othering, and this is constantly down to the environment being perceived as like an interest. Are you interested in the environment? Do you do geography? Oh, you must be interested in the environment. It's like, it needs to be separated. The environment is for everybody. It affects everybody. So how can we make content that is just consumable for everyone? And a great example is, I don't know if anyone knows Make My Money Matter, but they're, do you know them?
I think.
So they are, they're basically addressing sustainability around pensions. And recently there's some kind of breaking research that 88 billion of our pensions, UK pensions, are being invested into fossil fuels. And when we got given that research, we thought, number one, that is like the heaviest fact we could think of. I can't even really imagine 88 billion. And number two, just like pensions, how are we going to make this exciting? This is like a really difficult statement to share. So we actually worked with Lira on it, and we made it into a really conversational kind of interview, lab Bible type style, where we literally just spoke about pensions, like who really thinks about their pensions? Did you know this? Did you know your pensions could be connected to climate change? Made it from like a human perspective, which intertwines the message rather than the other way around. It's human-centric.
like really not confusing, really, yeah, I like that. Yeah.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think that climate, it can feel very alienating and apocalyptic, you know, and just, and I think the main thing, I think the thing is to figure out, like, you know, you're obviously very stylish, and it's just.
Oh, thank you. Oh, damn. Oh.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think it's that thing of going back to yourself, actually, and what do you love to do? Like, what do you, the fact that you've walked up here, you know, clearly, like, very open and, like, up for...
I cycled here in the morning.
Did you?
Oh,
exactly.
who did that? No one. Oh.
You know, you've got a lot to give, basically. And so I think it's about you, what do you know, because, and then you can imbue that environmentally in a way that is authentic to think about. I think it's about you, like, well, what do I, kind of asking yourself those questions, because you're clearly got a lot to give. Sorry, I don't mean to sound patronizing. I mean it. Like, you're clearly, like, really up for it, so that's great. Yeah. Sorry, I haven't really answered your question. I think it's about you figuring out what you love to do and then thinking what else you feel passionate about within the environment or one element, so mine's sort of clothes. And what that is it painting things that you love in the environment, you know, that in itself. I mean, if one was going to paint daisies and roses and flowers, that's such a message. You know, do you know what I mean? And the way that you put it out, your feelings, your thoughts around that. It's about what you're saying and what you feel and how you're communicating that.
I really understand that. Just like, because I feel like we take in so many things, but then just like relaying it and just how do you communicate it in a way that's coherent. And then there's so many things going on today. It's like, oh, like you can literally just walk onto your phone or just actually walk outside and see like 1,000 things happen. But then like just being able to put it on a page and just like coherently explain it to someone else is another thing.
Well, no, it's about how but it can be, if it's from here and it's what you love, then you'll do it well and you'll do it with a sense of clarity. And so don't listen to the white noise. About you and what you...
Well, I'm doing some poetry later, so I'm hopefully going to do it well, so yeah.
Anyway, over to you, Yusuf.
Yeah. I'm sure the speakers will be around for a bit after. Would you like to come up and ask a question, Emma? Oh. I'll pass this.
Thank you. My question is slightly more brief, maybe. I didn't also cycle here, so sorry about that. My question is kind of looking more retrospectively. So obviously within the climate space, we encounter lots of challenges which can be really detrimental to our mental health and physical health. But what advice would you give to your former self, particularly maybe when you've gone through a really challenging period? What advice would you give to your younger self? If that's okay.
I'll answer this because openly I suffer from burnout so much. I suffer from eco-anxiety as well, which is a big thing, I think, in this sector. And I think advice I would give to my younger self, although I like to think I'm still really young, is probably like the moment you feel burnt out, or if you're following some sort of platform that's like giving you super eco-anxiety, guys, unfollow it. Like, you don't have to feel eco-anxiety. Like, you don't have to put yourself, you know, in positions where, you know, you're feeling really anxious and I think, you know, as well, I deal with maybe a lot of guilt in this environmental sector because you're like, I could be doing more, and you're comparing yourself to people that are doing more than you. Like, I should be doing more. And I think if I could give advice to my younger self, I'd say, like, Lira, chill. Like, you're doing what you can with the resources you can. You do not need to put yourself in a position when you burn out. So really, guys, look after your mental health. A piece of advice as well, which I'm trying to do recently, is like find a hobby that's probably not connected as well to like the whole eco-environment thing. Because I decided to pick up birding as a hobby, and I still felt like I was burning out while I was doing it for some reason. You feel like you're working. Pick a hobby that's completely, you know, irrelevant to like the climate change movement. Maybe swimming, gym, or something where you can really disconnect from everything. And you're going to need to do that because it is really, really heavy.
Yeah. I'll be very brief. Yeah, I mean, I think that's so true. But yes, sorry, to answer your question, from where I am, I remember I went through a real stage. Having said, I'm slightly reneging on what I said about, like, I was always like, knew exactly what I wanted to do, and I stuck with it. I did go through a point of feeling really like, I don't really know where I belong. because the secondhand thing was like, it was like 15 years ago, 10 years ago, and I remember I felt really kind of weirdly like, I don't know, like an outsider in some ways, and I felt, I just went through this time of feeling really estranged and not feeling like I fitted in. And someone actually said to me, she was like, well, you know, just embrace the fact that, you know, you're sort of outside of that whole, that world in a way, the fashion world in a way. And so my point would be that looking back, having those feelings sometimes of when you feel like you don't quite belong, or you feel a bit alienated, or those sorts of feelings, but you kind of are who you are, you know, just stick with you are who you are, and just, I mean, those feelings happen anyway, but my point being just stick with your guns, basically. But I think that's really important. Yeah. Does that make sense? No.
I think we might have to move on to our closing statements now. But if maybe each of you could speak for 1 minute as a wrap-up, maybe a final thought, climate thought that hasn't been covered today, or a piece of climate advice for everyone here. Just a 1 minute wrap-up. Should we go to Emma first?
Okay, my final thought would be, I guess this is from a communications perspective, but really starting to embed the nature connection into other people, whether it's people you work with, your family, your friends. I think is the key line of climate change is not a geographer's problem. The environment impacts everyone. It's not an interest. Everyone is ultimately interconnected into the environment. So it's just rethinking that, reframing that, breaking those boundaries, making sure that when you speak about the environment, it's connected to them, what they're doing, their business, their stage in life, like just making sure it's relatable because it's not an interest.
Brilliant, thanks. Bay, if we come to you next.
Yes, I mean, exactly. I think it's everyone trying to do, you know, the best they can, and all of us, you know, I mean, I will say, you know, try and buy secondhand if you can, because that's the area that I'm really invested in, and I really believe it's stylistically a more fun choice, and it's so much better for the environment. But I guess it's just, as you say, we're all in it together, right? It's not someone else's problem, it's all of us. So we just need to all do, you know, our best in whatever way that is to try and, I was going to say make this problem go away, but, you know, to try our best, because, you know, it's very, very, very frightening, and it's happening now, and I find it extraordinary that more is not being done, but let's just do our best.
Great. And Lira, finally, if you'd like to give us your closing thought.
So I would say, like, just looking around the room, by the way, guys, I'm so happy the diversity here. It's making me really proud. But like every single person here is super unique. You would have had your own unique journey into the sector, your own unique experiences in life. And I think coming from like a storyteller, I think you guys should really, you know, tell your story. And it is going to, like, there'll be people out there who have had similar experiences and wanted to get into the nature scene or environmental scene or climate, you know, change scene. So I think storytelling and really raising awareness on the barriers you faced. And I think everyone here as well has their own interests and their own knowledge and expertise. Like, bring that to the table. We need all different types of people jumping on this wave. It's like, for too long, it's been really like expert and exclusive. I think we just need like cool people with different interests, whether you're like creative, an artist, a baker, a painter, whatever it is, like tell your story and like be proud of it. And make friends as well, guys. Like, networking is key in this sector. Don't be scared to make friends. If anyone wants to make friends with me, I'm open to making new friends, by the way. So, yeah.
Thanks so much. I don't think I can give a better wrap-up than that. Be authentic, recognize your uniqueness, make friends, buy secondhand. So many good lessons there. Thank you so much for listening to our panel and for the great questions as well. Thanks so much, everyone.